Trevs Hockey Show. I'm the Trev. Sweet. Anyway, before I get too carried away on one project, I should at least work on another one. I've got so many projects on the go, but the one I'm working on now, like I said in the first one, I don't think it's going to take too long. I'll probably burn through that one pretty quick. This one that I'm working on still, it still requires some thought. Going back to favorite players from every team of all time, or at least since I've started watching hockey. And it's a shame I'm not doing all time because I'm missing out on a lot of legends. But it's unfair of me to put a player I never watched growing up in a list of my favorite players of all time. It just doesn't work that way. It almost feels different. But my own opinion aside, let's keep going. Let's talk about my favorite St. Louis Blues of all time. Let's do it. It's a brief little history lesson here for you. St. Louis Blues have been around since 1967. They're part of the next six. Because there was the original six, and then there was the next six, which was the next six of expansion teams. That grew the league from 6 to 12. Since 1967, they've been to the Cup 4 times. 3 times in a row in their first 3 seasons. It helps when you're an expansion team in a weak division. They've only won the Cup once, and that was in 2019. And that was a shock to me. I know it wasn't a shock to many, but it was a shock to me. Fun fact, if they would have went ahead with that move to Saskatchewan in the 1980s, they would have never had a Cup in St. Louis. It might have been Saskatchewan. They were so broke and so on the verge of either folding or moving that they had a deal in place to move to Saskatoon until last-minute efforts were made to have local investors buy the team. So they lucked out, and it hasn't been a disappointment since. They were one of the few teams that had a playoff record of how many consecutive years they made the playoffs. I think the record was 28 before it finally got snapped. But either way, let's talk about my favorite St. Louis Blues of all time. There are so many different other goalies I could have picked for St. Louis other than Grant Fuhr. Granted, he was only there for 4 seasons, and his last 2 weren't nearly as good for him, but his first 2, how could you miss him? He played in almost every game in his first 2 seasons. He was your workhorse at a getting on the year's age, but he kept them competitive. He really did. Posting 28 and 27 win seasons. He never went below 20 except for his last season, but that was because of injury. But either way, he was a good guy to have in net, especially when Cujo had already moved on. And I'm undecided which part of Al MacInnis I like more. The guy himself, because he was a spectacular defenseman. You put him on the same defensive pair as Pronger, and oh my goodness. It was very hard to get a goal in that night. Or do you like Al MacInnis' slap shot? For me, it's probably a bit more the latter. Because, unless you were a goalie, how do you not like Al MacInnis' slap shot? But in 10 years, he kept them competitive. In the 10 years he was there, up until he had to retire in 2003, 2004, they made the playoffs every season. Plus, the Norris Trophy to boot. So not a bad time for Al MacInnis. Now, I'm not going to lie. A lot of why I picked Peter Angelo is because he wore the number 27 in St. Louis. Anybody who wears the number 27 is usually good in my books. But the thing about Peter Angelo, however you want to pronounce it, he was always reliable when you needed him. Still is, even though he's not playing in St. Louis. And the fact that he was the first Blues captain to raise the Cup, you don't forget a thing like that. You just don't. No matter what team you cheer for, whether you cheer for St. Louis or not. It was a sad day when he left, I'm sure for a lot of Blues fans. But he was a good guy to watch on the point, especially when they were making that Cup run of theirs. Now, granted, he's only been there for 3 seasons, but his impact on the team has been undeniable since he came along. And I just ask his 2019 run, 77 points that season. To go with, his Stanley Cup, his Conn Smythe, and his Frank J. Selke trophy that season. And were for 2 shortened seasons, he'd probably have 70 more points to go with that 77 in 2018-19. Remember, that was the year he just made his debut in St. Louis after getting traded to Buffalo, where he lost his will to play. So it's been nothing but good for St. Louis since O'Reilly's come along, and it's been a fun thing to watch ever since. Now, there's more to just Pavel Demitra than him being involved in the locomotive crash, which we will talk about in September. Ever since he came to the Blues in '96, yeah, he only had an 8-game season that season, but every season after that, reliability all the way around. There was a couple times he was very close to 100 points in one season. You needed the goals, he got them. You needed somebody to set up a play, he got them. And the fact that he made playoffs every time in every season he was there, -1, but that was because of injury. He was a good superstar to have when your original superstar had just left. Who's that you're asking? I'm glad you asked. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not just making this up just to sound old. One of my earliest memories of any hockey of any kind was the day Brett Hull got traded from Calgary to St. Louis. It was trade deadline day, and it was a big deal because they interviewed him as he was carting his bag off and catching a plane, and the rest, as they say, is history. He's the last guy in my lifetime to do 50-50, 50 goals, 50 games, twice. On top of that, he almost gave 92 goals in a season a run for its money when he scored 86 in 90-91. I'm sorry, but for me, being introduced to the game when I was, seeing a guy of his caliber this early, yeah, probably, if not for Wayne Amario, one of the greatest goal scorers of my generation, then the stats don't lie. Because there's 5 seasons in a row where it was 50 plus. The fact that he also has a Lady Byng, a Hart, and a Lester B. Pearson in St. Louis to his name, it's not a bad thing either. It's just a shame that St. Louis didn't have a good cup run with Hull on board, but he was a fun player to watch when you were just getting into the game. So that's another one of Trev's hockey shows. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you're here. It means you're enjoying what I'm putting out, just as I'm enjoying making it for you. So it's win-win all the way around. But since you're here, hit that like button. While you're at it, hit that red button that says subscribe, because you know you want to. Subscribe makes you feel good, and we're still 24 away. Let's make that happen. All my socials, they're in the description down below. Moving forward, I'll probably continue on with the favorite jersey from every team. I know I have a trade page video to make this month, but you never thought you'd hear that in a long time. But either way, meantime, in between time, be looking for more videos from Trev. Later.